the top 1% in Canada. It sounds like a dream, a country club, a private school, early retirement. But here is the question nobody answers honestly. If you start today with absolutely nothing, zero in the bank, zero investments, zero inheritance, how long does it actually take to reach the top 1%? Not a fantasy, not a lottery ticket, a real plan with real numbers. And more importantly, do you even want to be in the 1%? Or is there a smarter, faster, more realistic target that changes your life without breaking you? Let us find out. First, we need to understand what the top 1% actually means in Canada. Most people guess wrong. They think $1 million. They think $2 million. They think you need a yacht. The real number, according to Statistics Canada and the latest wealth survey, is this: to be in the top 1% of Canadian earners by income, not wealth, just what you make each year. You need roughly $260,000 a year. That is high, but it is not impossible. But here is the trap. Income is not wealth. You can make $260,000 a year and still be broke if you spend it all. So the better number, the real number, is net worth. To be in the top 1% of Canadians by net worth, according to recent data, you need approximately $1.7 million in total assets minus debt. $1.7 million. That is the door. That is the line. Now the question, starting from zero, how long? Let me introduce you to someone. He does not have a name, but you know him. Maybe you are him. He is 25 years old. He works an average job, makes $65,000 a year. He has student debt. He rents an apartment. His TFSA is empty. His RRSP is empty. On paper, he is at zero. But here is what he has that most people waste: time. Let us run the math. If he saves just 15% of his income, that is roughly $800 a month, and he invests that money into a low-cost diversified portfolio, the same S&P 500 index fund that has returned roughly 10% annually over the last 50 years. Not gambling, not crypto, just owning the economy. Then by age 35, 10 years later, he has roughly $160,000. By age 45, 20 years, he crosses $600,000. By age 55, 30 years, he hits $1.8 million. That is the top 1%, starting from zero, 30 years. But here is what the headlines will not tell you. You do not need to wait 30 years, because that math assumed he never increased his savings rate, never got a promotion, never started a side business, never married someone with a second income. If he increases his savings to $2,000 a month, the timeline collapses to roughly 22 years. If he starts at 35 instead of 25, the timeline doubles. The most important variable in this entire equation is not your salary. It is not your stock picks. It is your start date. Now let me show you the mistake most Canadians make when they hear this. They look at the 1.7 million number and they panic. They think, I will never get there, so why try? And they do nothing. But the top 1% is a distraction. The real goal should be something else entirely. Let me introduce you to a better target, the top 10%. To be in the top 10% of Canadian net worth, you need roughly $1 million. That is still a lot. But watch what happens when you break it down. $800 a month invested at 7% gets you to $1 million in roughly 23 years. $2,000 a month gets you there in roughly 14 years. The gap between 0 and 1 million is hard, but it is not impossible. And here's the part that changes everything. At $1 million, invested properly, you can safely withdraw roughly $40,000 a year without touching the principal. That is $40,000 of passive income every year, forever. That is not yacht money. That is freedom money. That is fix the furnace without a panic attack money. That is take a year off when your mom gets sick money. The top 1% is a nice headline. The top 10% is a life. Now let us talk about the elephant in the room, the house. Remember the earlier video we made, the one about Canadian millionaires. Nearly 80% of Canadian millionaires only reach that status because of their home equity. They own a house worth $1.2 million. They have a mortgage. They have almost no cash. They are millionaires on paper and stressed in real life. If you want real wealth, not paper wealth, you cannot count your primary residence. So when I say $1 million to be in the top 10%, I mean investable assets, stocks, bonds, cash, TFSAs, RRSPs, money you can actually spend. That changes the math, and it changes the timeline. Because a house is not a retirement plan. A house is a place to live. Your retirement plan lives inside your TFSA, your RRSP, your non-registered account. Let me show you the 3 habits that separate the people who actually reach this number from the people who stay stuck. Habit 1. Consistent automated investing. Not once a year when you get your tax refund. Every single paycheck. The data from Statistics Canada is brutal. Only 7.5 million tax filers contributed to a TFSA in 2023 in a country of over 30 million adults. That means the majority do not contribute in any given year. The people who reach the top 10% do not wait for the perfect moment. They automate $50, $100, $200 every 2 weeks. It leaves their account before they can spend it. before life gets in the way. Habit 2. They do not hoard cash inside their registered accounts. 46% of TFSA holders keep their money in cash, earning less than 1%, losing to inflation every single year. The top 10% know that a TFSA is not a savings account. It is a container, a bucket, and they fill that bucket with low-cost index funds, the entire economy, compounding tax-free for decades. Habit 3. They attack debt like their future depends on it. Canada's household debt-to-income ratio is 177%. For every dollar of after-tax income, Canadians owe $1.77. The people who build real wealth pay off high-interest debt first. They accelerate mortgage payments when rates allow. They refuse to borrow against their home equity for lifestyle spending. They understand that every dollar paying interest is a dollar not compounding in their TFSA. Now let me answer the question most people are too afraid to ask. What if I start late? What if you are 45, 50, 55? Here's the honest answer. It is harder, but it is not impossible. A 45-year-old who saves $2,000 a month and invests at 7% will have roughly $500,000 by age 65. That is not the top 10%, but it is $500,000 of liquid wealth most Canadians will never have. And $500,000 properly invested generates $20,000 a year in passive income. That is the difference between retiring at 65 and working until you die. Let me tell you about someone real. She is a client of a financial planner I studied, a teacher, single mother, never made more than $75,000 a year. She started at 38 years old with $6,000 in credit card debt and a TFSA balance of zero. She did not try to become a top 1% millionaire. She tried to become free. She automated $300 a month into a simple balanced ETF. She ignored the noise. She did not check her balance every week. 12 years later, that TFSA was worth over $90,000. Her RRSP had grown to $110,000. She is not a millionaire, but she does not need to be. She has no debt. She has a paid-off car. She has a down payment for a small condo, and she sleeps better than most people with $1 million house and no cash. That is the real goal, not the 1%, the one thing. Financial breathing room. So let us come back to the original question. How long until you are in the top 1% in Canada, starting from zero? The honest answer is between 20 and 30 years of disciplined, consistent investing. But here is the question you should actually be asking. How long until you have enough? Enough to cover an emergency. Enough to take a year off. Enough to retire at 65 instead of 75. That timeline is much shorter, 10 to 15 years for most people. And it does not require you to be in the 1%. It only requires you to be in the small minority of Canadians who actually have a plan. The difference between the Canadian who retires with $500,000 and the Canadian who retires with nothing is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not a secret inheritance from a rich uncle. It is $100 a paycheck. It is an index fund. It is 20 years of patience. And it is the decision to stop measuring wealth by the size of your house and start measuring it by what your money can actually do for you tomorrow. Can it cover an emergency? Can it generate income while you sleep? Can it survive a housing market correction without your life falling apart? That is real wealth. That is liquid wealth. And in a country where the average home costs more than most people will earn in a decade, it has never been more important to know the difference. So here is your assignment. Open your banking app right now. Check your TFSA balance. Check your contribution room on the Canada Revenue Agency website. If you have cash sitting in that account doing nothing, move it into an index fund tomorrow. If you have not set up an automatic contribution, set it up tonight for the next payday, even if it is $20. Because the top 1% is a nice dream, but the top 10% is a plan. And a plan beats a dream every single time. If you learned something from this video, hit that subscribe button.